What fascinates me most about the human experience? It's not the tall buildings we've built or the oceans we've crossed. It's something far more powerful, yet so personal, it's that 3-pound universe sitting right between our ears. I've spent decades watching people chase success, wondering why some make it while others don't. And I'm going to tell you something that might surprise you. It's rarely about talent. It's not about luck either. The difference, my friends, is all in the mind. Every morning, you wake up with roughly 70,000 thoughts ahead of you. That's 70,000 opportunities to build yourself up or tear yourself down. 70,000 chances to move forward or step back. Now, isn't that something? Most people spend more time planning their next vacation than learning to control these thoughts. They let their minds run wild like an untamed horse, then wonder why they keep ending up in places they never meant to go. I once met a young man in Chicago. Bright fellow, had all the opportunities in the world, but he told me something that stopped me in my tracks. He said, "I've tried everything, but I just can't get ahead." So I asked him, "Everything, have you tried controlling what goes on in your head?" The look on his face, priceless, because that's when it hit him. He'd been trying to change everything around him without first changing what was within him. Your mind, friends, is like the most sophisticated computer ever created. But here's the catch. It doesn't come with an instruction manual. Nobody teaches us how to use it properly. We just let it run on whatever program was installed by our circumstances, our environment, and sometimes, unfortunately, by people who themselves never learned to control their own minds. But here's the good news, and this is important. You can learn to master it. Just like you can learn to play an instrument or drive a car, you can learn to direct your thoughts. The question is, are you willing to put in the work? Because while everyone wants to change their life, few are willing to first change their. Once you understand how to harness the power of your mind, once you learn to direct those 70,000 daily thoughts instead of being directed by them, you'll discover something remarkable, that the biggest battle you'll ever fight isn't out there in the world. It's right here, in your own mind. So what if I told you that the very thing holding you back could become your greatest asset? Because that's exactly what happens when you learn to control your uncontrolled mind. Most people don't realize they're in a battle every single day. They're fighting all right, but they're fighting the wrong enemy. They blame the economy, they blame their boss, they blame the weather, while the real battle is happening right between their ears. I remember sitting at a coffee shop in Dallas years ago, watching people rush by outside the window. Everyone looked busy. Everyone looked determined, but how many of them knew where their minds were taking them? It reminded me of something profound. We're all driving cars, but some of us have never learned to steer. Your mind is like two people living in the same house. One wants to get up early, exercise, work hard, save money. The other one, that one wants to hit the snooze button, eat the extra cookie, spend the money, and take the easy road. And they're both you. I had a friend who used to say, "I can't help thinking negative thoughts." And I said to him, "Really? If someone offered you $1 million to control your thoughts for just 1 hour, could you do it?" He smiled because he knew the answer. Of course he could. The problem isn't our capacity to control our thoughts, it's that we haven't made it important enough. Your uncontrolled mind is like a garden that nobody tends to. And what happens to an untended garden? The weeds don't ask permission to grow. They don't check your schedule or wait for a convenient time. They just take over. Your negative thoughts, your fears, your doubts, they're like those weeds. They don't need an invitation to grow. You're the gardener. You might not have chosen all the seeds that were planted in your mind over the years. Maybe you grew up in an environment where doubt flourished. Maybe you were surrounded by people who specialized in negative thinking. That wasn't your choice. But what grows in your garden from this day forward, that's on you. The internal battle isn't just about positive versus negative thinking. It's deeper than that. It's about who's in charge. You or your uncontrolled thoughts? When an opportunity comes along, which voice do you listen to? The one that says go for it, or the one that lists all the reasons why you might fail? I've watched people stand at the edge of greatness, ready to take that step that could change everything. And then their uncontrolled mind whispers, what if you're not good enough? What if you fail? What if people laugh? And just like that, they step back. They retreat to their comfort zone, where it's safe, where their uncontrolled mind can keep them small. You don't have to win it all at once. You just have to win it moment by moment, thought by thought, choice by choice. It's like building a muscle. You don't go from lifting 5 pounds to 500 pounds overnight. You build strength gradually, consistently, 1 rep at a time. And that's exactly what mastering your mind is like. It's not about never having a negative thought again. It's about recognizing those thoughts when they come and saying, not today. I'm in charge here. Because the truth is, your life moves in the direction of your strongest thoughts. And if those thoughts are uncontrolled, well, where do you think they're taking you? Speaking of where thoughts can take you, let me tell you about the real cost of leaving your mind uncontrolled. You know what's the most expensive real estate in the world? It's not in New York or Tokyo or London. It's the space between your ears. And when you let chaos reign there, oh my, the cost is staggering. Let me paint you a picture of what mental chaos really costs. I was talking to a successful businessman in Phoenix last month. By all outside measures, he had it made. Beautiful home, thriving business, wonderful family. But he couldn't sleep at night. His mind was running a 24-hour news channel of worry, doubt, and fear. And you know what he told me? He said, I've made millions in business, but I'm bankrupt in peace of mind. Now, isn't that something? Here's a man who knew how to build wealth, but he never learned how to build mental clarity. The cost. His health was suffering. His relationships were strained, and his joy. Well, that packed its bags and left town a long time ago. But it's not just the big things. Mental chaos charges you interest every single day in ways you might not even notice. You walk into a room and forget why you're there. You miss opportunities because your mind is too busy replaying yesterday's mistakes. You can't focus on a conversation because your thoughts are scattered like leaves in a storm. And here's what really gets me. People will spend thousands of dollars on their physical appearance, on their cars, on their homes. But they'll let their minds run wild without investing a single minute in mental discipline. That's like having $1 million race car and never changing the oil. The cost shows up in your decisions too. When your mind is in chaos, you make choices from chaos. And chaotic choices, they create chaotic results. It's as simple as that. I've seen people lose fortunes, relationships, and opportunities, not because they weren't capable, but because their uncontrolled mind made decisions they would never make in a state of clarity. Your uncontrolled mind is the most expensive employee you'll ever have. It works around the clock, charging you premium rates, but instead of building your dreams, it's often sabotaging them. It shows up late, leaves early, and spends most of its time gossiping about everything that could go wrong. I remember a young woman who came to one of my seminars. She had this brilliant business idea, something that could have changed her life, but she never started. Why? Because her uncontrolled mind kept playing this movie of failure over and over. The cost wasn't just the business she never built. It was all the lives she could have touched, all the value she could have created, all the growth she could have experienced. The tragedy isn't just in what chaos cost us. It's in what it prevents us from becoming. An uncontrolled mind is like a ceiling over your potential, limiting how high you can rise. And the worst part, most people never even realize it's there. But here's the thing about costs. Once you recognize them, you can do something about them. And that's where discipline comes in. You know what most people get wrong about discipline? They think it's a prison. But I'm here to tell you, discipline is your ticket to freedom. The most disciplined mind is the most free mind. Now, isn't that interesting? Think about a wild river. Powerful, chaotic, destroying everything in its path. But when you channel that same water, control its flow, it can light up cities, irrigate farms, change landscapes. That's what mental discipline does. It doesn't reduce your power, it amplifies it. I remember talking to an Olympic athlete. People saw his success and said, "Oh, he's so lucky, lucky." This man woke up at 4 a.m. every day for 15 years. He trained when he was tired, when he was sore, when everyone else was sleeping. But here's what struck me most. He told me the hardest part wasn't the physical training. It was training his mind to embrace the discipline. Now, some of you might be thinking, but isn't discipline restrictive? Doesn't it limit you? Let me ask you something. Is a pilot restricted by knowing how to fly a plane? Is a musician restricted by knowing how to play their instrument? That's what mental discipline is. It's learning to play the instrument of your mind. I've watched people try everything to succeed. New businesses, new relationships, new diets, new jobs. But without mental discipline, it's like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. You can pour in all the good stuff you want, but if you haven't disciplined your mind to hold it, it'll just leak right out. Discipline, it starts with small victories. You don't climb Mount Everest on your first hike. You start with a hill. Maybe your first victory is just catching yourself when your mind starts to wander. Maybe it's choosing to read a book instead of watching TV. Small victories, but they add. I had a friend who complained he couldn't focus for more than 5 minutes. So I told him, start with 2 minutes, just 2 minutes of complete mental focus. He laughed at first, thought it was too easy. But you know what? Those 2 minutes were harder than he expected, but he did it. Then 5 minutes, then 10. Within a month, his whole life started changing. Why? Because discipline in one area spreads to all areas. The beautiful thing about mental discipline is that it compounds. Every time you choose to control your thoughts instead of letting them control you, you're building mental muscle. Every time you direct your focus instead of letting it scatter, you're strengthening your mind's ability to serve you rather than sabotage you. Once you start developing mental discipline, you'll find freedom you never knew existed. Freedom from random thoughts pulling you in every direction. Freedom from emotional reactions that don't serve you. Freedom to choose your response instead of being a slave to every impulse. Discipline isn't about restriction. It's about liberation. It's about being able to tell your mind, go there, and it goes. Focus here, and it focuses. Be calm, and it's calm. Now that's real freedom. But to get there, you need to understand something crucial about mastering your mind. You know what's interesting about mastering your brain? No, you don't know. It's an art, not just a science. And like any great art, it requires both technique and inspiration. I'm reminded of something I observed years ago watching a master craftsman at work. He told me the difference between an amateur and a master isn't just skill, it's understanding. Your mind is like a magnificent orchestra capable of creating beautiful music or terrible noise. And you're the conductor. Now, most people, they just let the orchestra play whatever it wants. Some days it's a symphony. Other days it's pure chaos. But mastery is when you pick up that conductor's baton and lead. I met a woman in Seattle who transformed her entire life through mental mastery. She used to be controlled by every thought that floated through her mind, every worry, every fear, every doubt. One day, she decided to start treating her thoughts like guests at a party. Just because they show up doesn't mean you have to serve them dinner and invite them to stay the night. Here's what most people don't understand about mental mastery. It's not about controlling every thought. That's impossible. It's about controlling your response to those thoughts. Think of your mind like a busy street. You can't stop the traffic, but you can decide which cars you're going to follow. The art of mental mastery has 3 key elements. First, awareness. You've got to become the observer of your thoughts. Most people are so tangled up in their thinking, they don't even realize they're thinking. They're like fish who don't know they're in water. Second choice, understanding that between every thought and action, there's a moment of choice. And third, direction. You've got to know where you're steering this powerful vehicle of your mind. I remember talking to a group of executives in Chicago, smart people, very successful, but they were slaves to their minds. Every email triggered a reaction. Every meeting stirred up emotions. Every challenge sent their thoughts spinning. I asked them, who's running the company? You or your uncontrolled reactions? The room got very quiet. Here's something profound about mental mastery. It's not just about positive thinking. Sometimes people get this wrong. They try to cover up negative thoughts with positive ones, like putting a fresh coat of paint on a rusty car. That's not mastery. Mastery is about understanding your thoughts, all of them, and then deciding which ones get to drive your actions. You've got to treat your mind like a garden where you're both the gardener and the guard. As the gardener, you plant the thoughts you want to grow, your goals, your dreams, your positive expectations. As the guard, you protect your mental space from weeds, those negative thoughts that try to take root and spread. The most beautiful part about mental mastery, it changes everything. Your relationships improve because you're no longer reacting from an uncontrolled mind. Your work improves because you can focus your mental energy like a laser. Your happiness improves because you're no longer at the mercy of every stray thought that wanders through your mind. Mastery, it's a practice, not a destination. Even the greatest masters practice their art every day. They know that yesterday's mastery doesn't guarantee today's performance. Each day, you've got to pick up that conductor's baton again. Each day, you've got to tend to your mental garden. And speaking of practice, let me share with you some powerful tools that can help you on this journey of mastery. Let me share with you some practical tools that can transform your mind from a wild stallion into a disciplined partner. But remember, a tool is only as good as the person using it. I've got a friend who bought the most expensive hammer in the hardware store, but it didn't make him a carpenter. It's not about having the tools, it's about using them. The first tool I want to give you is what I call the 5-minute focus. Every morning, before the world starts making demands on your time, take 5 minutes, just 5 minutes to sit quietly and direct your mind where you want it to go. Not where it wants to wander, but where you choose to guide it. It's like warming up before the big game. Stop, look, choose method. Here's a powerful tool. When you feel your mind running away with you, stop. Look at what's happening in your thoughts. Then choose your response. A man came up to me after a seminar in Boston and said this simple tool saved his business. Why? Because he stopped making decisions from an uncontrolled emotional state. Your words? Now there's a tool most people never sharpen. The way you talk to yourself is either building mental strength or creating mental chaos. I remember a young entrepreneur who used to say, "I'm not good with numbers." Well, guess what happened? Every time he looked at his financials, his mind would shut down faster than a store at closing time. We changed that too. I'm learning to understand numbers better, and everything shifted. Here's one of my favorites. The future self conversation. Take a few minutes each day to talk with the person you're becoming. Ask yourself, what would my future self thank me for doing today? It's amazing how this simple tool can cut through mental clutter and bring clarity to your decisions. Just like you'd audit your finances, audit your thoughts. At the end of each day, ask yourself, what thoughts did I invest in today? Did they pay dividends or create debt? A businessman in Houston told me this tool doubled his productivity in 30 days. You can't just remove a negative thought. Nature abhors a vacuum. You've got to replace it with something stronger. When worry shows up, replace it with planning. When fear appears, replace it with preparation. When doubt creeps in, replace it with action. I watched a woman transform her life using these tools. She came to me overwhelmed, her mind spinning like a tire stuck in mud. Lots of noise, lots of motion, but no forward progress. 6 months later, using these tools daily, she had started her own business. The difference. She learned to direct her mental energy instead of being drained by it. Remember this? These tools aren't complicated, but they are powerful. Just like a simple key can start a powerful engine, these basic tools can ignite tremendous mental power, but you've got to use them. Having them in your mental toolbox isn't enough. And speaking of using tools, let's talk about how to build something remarkable with them. Your mental fortress. Here's the truth that took me years to understand. A strong mind isn't born, it's built brick by brick, day by day, decision by decision. Just like a fortress, it doesn't appear overnight. But once it's built, that's when life gets interesting. I met a gentleman in Denver who had lost everything. His business, his savings, almost his family. But he had something remarkable, an unshakable mental fortress. While everyone around him was panicking, he stayed calm. While others saw disaster, he saw opportunity. Why? Because he'd spent years building mental walls strong enough to withstand any storm. Your mental fortress starts with the foundation, your non-negotiables. These are the thoughts and principles you won't compromise, no matter what's happening around you. Like a fortress built on solid rock, your mind needs to rest on unchangeable truths. What are yours? What thoughts will you stand on when everything else is shaking? The walls of your fortress, they're built from daily habits. Every time you choose discipline over distraction, you're adding another brick. Every time you maintain focus when the world is screaming for your attention, you're strengthening those walls. A woman in Atlanta told me something profound. She said, I used to think building mental strength was about big moments. Now I know it's about small choices made consistently. Some people build mental walls so thick that they can no longer see opportunities. They can't let in new ideas or fresh perspectives. Your fortress should protect you, not imprison you. Those windows, they're your ability to stay open to growth while staying true to your principles. Think about the gate of your fortress. It needs to be strong enough to keep out mental intruders. Those thoughts that want to sabotage your progress, but efficient enough to let in allies. Not every thought deserves entry into your mental space. You've got to be the gatekeeper. I remember working with a young athlete, talented kid, but his mind was like a house with open doors. Everything got in. Fear got in. Doubt got in. Other people's limitations got in. We spent 6 months building his mental fortress. Know what happened? He didn't just improve, he transformed. Because when your mind is protected, your potential can flourish. The beauty of a mental fortress is that it gives you something rare in today's world, peace of mind. When you've built strong mental walls, when you've established clear boundaries for your thoughts, you create a space where clarity can live, where decisions can be made from strength, not fear. But remember this, even the strongest fortress needs maintenance. You can't build it and forget it. Every day you've got to check those walls, reinforce those foundations, make sure that gate is working properly, because life will test your fortress. That's for certain. And that brings us to something vital, how this fortress you're building can lead you to extraordinary living. You know what separates ordinary from extraordinary? It's not what most people think. It's not talent. I've seen talented people waste their gifts. It's not luck. I've watched people create their own luck. Something far more powerful. It's the ability to master your mind and direct it toward greatness. I remember sitting in a coffee shop in Minneapolis, watching people rush by. Everyone looked busy, but busy doing what? Most were living lives of quiet desperation, their minds pulling them in 100 different directions. But extraordinary living, That starts when you decide which direction deserves your mental energy. Let me tell you about a cab driver I met in Chicago. Simple job, right? But this man had turned it into something extraordinary. How? He told me every morning I decide what kind of day I'm going to have. Not my passengers, not the traffic, me. He had understood something profound. Extraordinary living isn't about what you do. It's about how you think about what you do. Extraordinary living isn't some distant mountain peak you reach one day. It's built in ordinary moments through extraordinary thinking. It's choosing to direct your thoughts toward excellence when mediocrity would be easier. It's deciding that your mind will be your ally, not your enemy. I watched a mother of 3 transform her life. She didn't change her circumstances. She changed her thinking. While others complained about not having time, she directed her mind to find solutions. While others made excuses, she made progress. The difference? She understood that extraordinary living starts with extraordinary thinking. Your mind is like an elevator. It can take you to the penthouse of possibility or the basement of limitation, the choice of floors. That's up to you. Every thought is like pushing a button. What level are you choosing? Most people let their uncontrolled minds randomly push buttons all day long, then wonder why they never reach the top. The moment you decide to live extraordinarily, to think extraordinarily, something shifts. Your problems don't disappear, but your capacity to handle them expands. Your circumstances might not change overnight, but your ability to navigate them transforms. And this is where most people get stuck. They're waiting for extraordinary circumstances to create extraordinary lives. But that's backward thinking. It's extraordinary thinking that creates extraordinary circumstances. Every major achievement in human history started with someone thinking differently, thinking beyond the ordinary. And speaking of thinking differently, it's time to talk about the moment of truth, taking action. You know what's interesting about action? Everyone talks about it, but here's what they don't tell you. Action without directed thinking is like driving a car blindfolded. Sure, you're moving, but where are you going? I remember standing in front of a mirror one morning, years ago, and realizing something powerful. All the knowledge in the world, all the good intentions, all the positive thinking, they're worthless without this critical moment. The moment when you stop planning and start doing. But here's the key. Your actions must flow from a controlled mind. Let me tell you about a businessman I met in San Francisco. He was always busy, always moving, always doing something. But he was getting nowhere. Why? Because his uncontrolled mind had him chasing every opportunity, reacting to every situation, jumping at every new idea. That's not action. That's reaction. There's a world of difference. Real action comes from a place of clarity. It's like an arrow shot from a steady bow. Direct, purposeful, powerful. When your mind is in chaos, your actions will be too. But when your mind is controlled, focused, directed, I want you to understand something crucial. This very moment, right now, is your moment of truth. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when the conditions are perfect. Because let me tell you something. The conditions will never be perfect. The only perfect moment is the one you decide to take control of your mind, and through it, your actions. Some of you might be thinking, but what if I fail? Here's what I know about failure. It's not your enemy. An uncontrolled mind that keeps you from trying, that's your enemy. Failure is just feedback, but you've got to be in action to get that feedback. The beauty of controlled thinking is that it leads to controlled action. Not reckless action, not desperate action, but purposeful action. The kind of action that builds momentum. The kind of action that creates results. The kind of action that transforms lives. And that brings us to our final thoughts, to your new beginnings. They can happen any moment you choose. Right here, right now, you can decide that your mind will no longer be your master. It will be your servant. That's a new beginning worth having. I look around this room and I see unlimited potential. But potential without a controlled mind is like having $1 million check You never cash. Some of you came here today thinking you needed more knowledge, more strategies, more techniques. But what you really needed was to understand this fundamental truth. Your uncontrolled mind has been the ceiling to your growth. Remember that garden we talked about? The one where thoughts grow like weeds or flowers depending on your care? Well, now you're the gardener. You've got the tools. You understand the cost of mental chaos. You see the power of discipline. You recognize what's possible with a mastered mind. I met a man last year who told me something profound. He said, for 40 years, I thought I was listening to my mind. Today, I realized my mind was listening to me. That's the transformation I want for each of you. Because when your mind starts listening to you, instead of you listening to every random thought it produces, that's when life becomes a creation instead of a reaction. But here's what I want you to understand about new beginnings. They're not about perfection. You'll have days when old thought patterns try to take over. That's okay. What matters is that now you see, now you understand that the battle isn't out there. It's in here. Some of you might be thinking, is it really that simple? No, it's not simple, but it is that clear. Clear is the difference between letting a horse run wild and learning to ride it. Clear is the difference between being swept away by a river and learning to swim. Take these truths with you. Let them sink deep into your consciousness. Your mind is either your greatest ally or your biggest enemy, and you get to decide which it will be. Not once, but every day. Not in some dramatic moment, but in those quiet moments when no one's watching. This isn't just another seminar, another talk, another set of ideas to file away. This is your declaration of mental independence, your personal revolution, your moment of saying, from this day forward, my mind works for me, not against me. And as you leave here today, remember this. The world doesn't change when you learn these principles. It changes when you live them, when you apply them, when you make them as natural as breathing. Your new beginning starts now. Not because I said so, but because you've decided so. Because you now understand that the quality of your life will never exceed the quality of your thinking. And that's a truth worth building a life on.